In the early days of May, amid ongoing tensions in the Red Sea with really no signs of de-escalation, an B-2 Spirit stealth bomber, valued at over $2 billion, suddenly appeared near the Gulf of Aden, a region where Houthi forces continued to quietly launch attacks on international shipping routes, completely contradicting reports that the Houthis had surrendered. This is not a typical presence. Unlike the B-1 bombers or P-8 surveillance aircraft, the B-2 usually appears only in strategic missions when the US wants to send a very strong deterrent signal without having to say a word. According to sources from military analysts and reports of civilian radar signals being abruptly cut off in eastern Yemen, it is possible that the B-2 was deployed from Diego Garcia or Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar to conduct a stealth flight aimed at surveying and assessing the air defense capabilities of the Houthis, as well as the military presence of Iran in the region. However, what the American commanders could not anticipate was that the Houthis had prepared an aerial ambush based on ISR signals collected over several days. Unofficial information from several military monitoring accounts indicates that at least 6 Samad 3 and Qasef K-2 drones, which have previously been used to attack Saudi Arabian bases, were launched simultaneously from 3 different locations in the provinces of Sada and Al Hudaydah. The target? Nothing less than the B-2 Spirit, the ghost of the sky. These UAVs do not have advanced counter-radar capabilities, but they rely on data shared from ground-based infrared sensors, and analyze thermal signals from aircraft engines, which led to the B-2, known for its radar-evading abilities, being unexpectedly detected. As the $2 billion aircraft continued to approach the region of Yemen to carry out reconnaissance and strategic deterrence missions, the asymmetric attack commenced. No one expected that in a sky that seemed completely safe, America's most advanced aircraft would be surrounded by small, nearly silent UAVs. These UAVs accelerated and charged in a swarm from multiple directions, a typical tactic of asymmetric warfare. At the U.S. Air Force Coordination Center in the Gulf, the early warning system immediately alerted to a critical situation. A B-2 was under attack. This was not just a tactical risk, but it could also become a symbolic failure. Yet at that moment, which seemed so urgent, the stealth curtain of the U.S. Air Force began to be lifted. A quick, sharp response that had been meticulously prepared was immediately deployed, and what happened next not only obliterated the Houthi UAVs, but also left the entire Middle Eastern observer community astonished. A quick, sharp response that had been meticulously prepared was immediately deployed, and what happened next not only obliterated the Houthi UAVs but also left the entire Middle Eastern observer community astonished. On the screen at the command center of the United States Central Command, or CENTCOM, a series of UAV signals were tracking a coded strategic target, none other than the B-2 Spirit that had just entered the danger zone. However, what the Houthi UAVs could not detect was that the B-2 was not flying alone. At an altitude and distance beyond the awareness of the UAVs but well within the tactical coverage, 2 F-22 Raptor fighter jets were silently escorting the B-2 like stealthy guardians. This is a carefully calculated combination. The B-2 has the ability to penetrate dense air defense systems, while the F-22 is an air superiority fighter designed to detect and eliminate threats before the enemy even realizes they are being monitored. This is a carefully calculated combination. The B-2 has the ability to penetrate dense air defense systems, while the F-22 is an air superiority fighter designed to detect and eliminate threats before the enemy even realizes they are being monitored. As soon as the Houthi UAVs approached, the integrated air defense warning sensors on the B-2 immediately sent a high-priority signal to the support team. In less than 20 seconds, the F-22 broke radio silence, locked onto the target and launched a counterattack. A series of AIM-120 AMRAAM air-to-air missiles were launched from a distance of about 18.6 miles, far exceeding the evasion capabilities of the suicide drones. Bright streaks tore through the night sky, ending the pursuit in an instant. 3 of the drones were destroyed right on their approach, but that was only the first half of the counterattack. The remaining UAVs switched to low-flying mode, a common tactic to evade radar, but inadvertently placed themselves within the perfect firing range of the 20mm Vulcan close-in weapon system, mounted on an AC-130J Ghost Rider patrolling from a distance. Here's the translation. This is a surprising detail many military experts did not expect. The US deploying AC-130S in such an aerial operation was unforeseen. However, based on images analyzed from videos recorded by local Yemen militias, showing bright streaks of gunfire lighting up the night sky, there is solid evidence to believe that a stealth firepower dominance formation had been fully established beforehand. And it's not just the F-22 or AC-130. From the ground, the Aegis defense system on the USS Carney destroyer, operating in the southern Red Sea, also contributed support. And it's not just the F-22 or AC-130. From the ground, the Aegis defense system on the USS Carney destroyer operating in the southern Red Sea also contributed support. The Spy-1 radar and SM-2 missiles were integrated to extend the early warning area, allowing the Air Force to respond before the UAVs could pose any real threat. The attack that the Houthis believed was a bold strike against American pride turned into an unprecedented wave of destruction of UAVs since the beginning of 2024. The multi-layered defense system, ranging from aerial to underwater to cyber, created an invisible net enveloping the B-2. Notably, one of the UAVs that was shot down did not fully detonate. Debris recovered from the Saudi side reveals something that has Washington on edge. The control circuitry and sensors on the UAV show signs of technology designed by Iran, possibly originating from a modified Shahed system. Notably, one of the UAVs that was shot down did not fully detonate. Debris recovered from the Saudi side reveals something that has Washington on edge. The control circuitry and sensors on the UAV show signs of technology designed by Iran, possibly originating from a modified Shahed system. This detail prompted US officials to issue an official warning 48 hours later. We are seriously monitoring the spread of asymmetric weapon technology to non-governmental forces. Every action will have consequences. From what seemed like an asymmetric UAV ambush, the Houthis inadvertently revealed two things: the absolute coordination of US forces and Iran's increasingly prominent role in supporting covert operations. And the B-2 Spirit, instead of being forced to withdraw, is now closer than ever to its true objective, eliminating a Houthi missile launch site deep within the interior of Yemen, a response that no one saw coming. And the B-2 Spirit, instead of being forced to withdraw, is now closer than ever to its true objective, eliminating a Houthi missile launch site deep within the interior of Yemen, a response that no one saw coming. And this is just the beginning. After all the Houthi suicide drones were shot down in just a few minutes, the Yemen military commanders thought the operation was over. However, that calm was just the beginning of a seismic event they had not anticipated. Instead of turning back, the B-2 Spirit continued to fly deep into international airspace near Yemen, as if no attack had just occurred. At this point, the aircraft no longer needed to maintain stealth mode. The weapon bays opened. The official mission had begun. Based on data collected from commercial satellite imagery by Maxar and open radar information, just 45 minutes after the aerial encounter, a series of extremely powerful explosions were recorded near the city of Saada, a region that US intelligence has repeatedly identified as the location of Houthi UAV control centers and mobile missile launch sites. Aerial images taken before and after the airstrike show that the solid structures were completely destroyed, with the surrounding ground charred, characteristic of a penetrating attack on underground facilities. Aerial images taken before and after the airstrike show that the solid structures were completely destroyed, with the surrounding ground charred, characteristic of a penetrating attack on underground facilities. The only weapon capable of achieving this undetected is the GBU-57 MOP, a guided bomb specifically designed for penetrating concrete, which only the B-2 bomber is capable of carrying. This has led analysts to believe that the B-2 is not just a decoy, but rather a dagger that the US has kept hidden in the shadows, aimed at severing the critical link in the chain of UAV attacks that the Houthis have been carrying out for months. Sources from Saudi Arabia confirm that the frequency of UAV incursions into the airspace of the kingdom has suddenly decreased significantly within 72 hours following the explosion. Sources from Saudi Arabia confirm that the frequency of UAV incursions into the airspace of the kingdom has suddenly decreased significantly within 72 hours following the explosion. Houthi media has remained completely silent, providing no information about the airstrike in Sada, which is, honestly, an indication that the damage is substantial and not easily recoverable. From the field data, it's pretty evident that the target being struck is not a civilian facility, but rather a concealed area disguised as a residential neighborhood. Inside, it contains an ammunition storage system, UAV control radar, and a small runway for medium-range unmanned aerial vehicles. The use of the B-2 by the U.S., an aircraft regarded as a trump card reserved for high-stakes strategic targets, clearly signals the seriousness of the threat posed by Houthi UAVs, especially as they are no longer just targeting cargo ships, but are beginning to seek out military aircraft as well. The use of the B-2 by the U.S., an aircraft regarded as a trump card reserved for high-stakes strategic targets, clearly signals the seriousness of the threat posed by Houthi UAVs, especially as they are no longer just targeting cargo ships, but are beginning to seek out military aircraft as well. In an analysis report published by the International Institute for Strategic Studies, or IISS, following the incident, experts asserted the Houthi forces made a significant mistake by expanding their attack range to a level of strategic deterrence. They are no longer just a local armed group, they have entered the red zone of a global power, and when you reach that red zone, the price to pay is never small. On regional military forums, images have been circulated showing a blackened circular patch in the desert of northern Yemen. Not a forest fire, nor caused by artillery, but rather the distinctive mark of a precision airstrike. On regional military forums, images have been circulated showing a blackened circular patch in the desert of northern Yemen. Not a forest fire, nor caused by artillery, but rather the distinctive mark of a precision airstrike. No one heard the sound, and no one had time to capture the moment the plane appeared. Everything was over before they realized they were the target. For the Houthis, the battlefield they set up is not a trap for the enemy, but rather a minefield they inadvertently stepped into. As the dawn broke over the northern hills of Yemen, an unusual silence enveloped the area. As the dawn broke over the northern hills of Yemen, an unusual silence enveloped the area. No drones were launched, there were no provocative messages from the Houthis, not a word of victory was declared. Only black smoke continued to rise from the area that was once the largest UAV operations center of this force. But in another place, thousands of miles away, on the deck of the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower aircraft carrier operating in the Arabian Sea, the commanding officers quietly monitored the satellite screens. A red dot represented the B-2 Spirit, which had safely left the combat zone, heading toward the base in Diego Garcia. There were no cheers, no official announcements, for that is not the style of the Ghost. This mission is not intended to be a show of force, it is a quiet yet clear message. The United States is prepared to respond to any threat, not with words but with precision, technology, and a level of coldness that leaves no room for reaction. Over the past several months, the world has witnessed an escalation in the use of attack drones by Houthi forces, causing damage to dozens of commercial vessels and forcing many countries to alter their shipping routes. However, the moment they reach too far, attempting to threaten a strategic symbol like the B-2, all boundaries were crossed. What astonished observers was not just the fact that the U.S. dared to deploy the B-2 in a high-risk area, but also the way it was integrated into a layered, invisible, and deadly strategy. No one saw it coming, no one knew it had left, they only knew where it had passed through, leaving destruction in its wake. Although the U.S. Department of Defense has not issued an official statement, the developments on the ground have spoken for them. And that message is not only directed at the Houthis, but also aimed at all the forces that are quietly funding, directing, or dreaming of using asymmetric tactics to undermine a superpower. And that message is not only directed at the Houthis, but also aimed at all the forces that are quietly funding, directing, or dreaming of using asymmetric tactics to undermine a superpower. A ghost has swept through the Middle East, leaving behind not an image but a warning made of fire and steel. One night in early May, the sky over the western Red Sea, just over 50 nautical miles from the coast of Yemen. No gunfire, no red alert, but the Spy-1 radar system on the Arleigh Burke-class destroyer has just detected an unusual signal. One night in early May, the sky over the western Red Sea just over 50 nautical miles from the coast of Yemen. No gunfire, no red alert, But the Spy-1 radar system on the Arleigh Burke-class destroyer has just detected an unusual signal. A series of low-speed, medium-altitude objects are flying in a curved trajectory from the land. Not birds, not commercial aircraft, and definitely not something harmless. In less than 2 minutes, the Operations Center identified this as a launch of suicide drones and cruise missiles deployed by Houthi forces. The target, a logistics group belonging to the U.S. Navy's Task Force 56, which was escorting commercial vessels along the international shipping route. A meticulously planned attack, coordinated, tactical. But what the Houthis didn't know was that they had been monitored from over 930 miles away from Diego Garcia Air Base, where a squadron of B-52 Hotel Stratofortresses had just been ordered to take off. At 0318 local time, 2 B-52s, equipped with satellite-guided JDAM bombs and AGM-158 JASSM cruise missiles, flew at an altitude of 49,200 feet, silently crossing the airspace over Oman and the Gulf of Aden. No radar waves detected, no sounds of the wind were recorded. They flew higher than the reach of any air defense systems the Houthis ever had. At the same time, at Al Dhafra Air Base in the UAE, a squadron of F-15 Echo Strike Eagles took off from the runway. They were not carrying heavy weapons but were equipped with target designation pods and electronic attack systems. Their role is not to drop bombs, rather, it is to tear apart the ground radar network, disable short-range communication systems, and lock down all hotspots in the Houthi operational area. The strike is divided into 2 layers. In the first wave, the B-52 will target ammunition depots, command centers, and signal relay stations in 3 areas: Hajjah, Abs, and the outskirts of Sada. In the second phase, the F-15 Echo will eliminate the mobile air defense systems, anti-aircraft artillery, and temporary radar that the Houthis have deployed to protect their UAV launch sites. At 0343, just as the Houthi UAV wave reached striking distance, the sky to the west suddenly lit up. The counterattack has begun. From an altitude unimaginable to the Houthis, JDAMs plunged down like steel needles, striking directly at the supply stations. Each explosion upon impact carried data with coordinates accurate to the meter. The F-15 Echo flew over the target area at supersonic speed, releasing a barrage of laser-guided bombs and activating its electronic jamming system, rendering all of the enemy's radio signals silent. In less than 10 minutes, 7 logistics points were completely destroyed, 3 radar positions were disabled, and all UAV guidance signals from the Houthis vanished from the tactical screen. The Houthis thought they were the ones striking first, but in reality, they were merely the ones stepping into a trap that had been set for them all along. 3:47 a.m., the first bomb strike hit the target in Hajjah. A logistics warehouse spanning nearly 3,200 square feet was torn apart by a direct hit from a JDAM. There are no more guiding signals, no more orders being transmitted, just smoke, dust, and emptiness. And that's just the first item on the list. From an altitude of 49,200 feet, the second B-52 opened fire, releasing a barrage of GPS-guided bombs onto the outskirts of Sada, where a small UAV and tactical rocket coordination center was located. 1 second earlier, the navigation signal was still active. 1 second later, the entire ground in that area turned into a bright red patch on the thermal image. In the sky, the F-15 Echo plunged into the battlefield like a speeding blade. They don't carry a lot of bombs, but each one is programmed with real-time data from the reconnaissance system. Every target, from mobile launchers and temporary radar to supply vehicles, is hit just seconds after being detected. In the Abs area, a large multi-launch rocket system is being moved out of the bunker. An F-15E locks onto the target from a distance of about 7.5 miles. A laser-guided bomb is released, and just 8 seconds later, the entire vehicle, its ammunition, and the accompanying technical team vanish from the landscape. 0353, the Red Sea, where the initial suicide drones were heading toward the formation of warships, became a no-fly zone. The signals from the Houthi UAVs are starting to become unstable. Some are circling back, some are falling into the sea, some are self-destructing in mid-air due to a complete loss of connection. The American destroyers did not need to open fire, as the threat was neutralized right from the outset. The Houthi command center is currently in a state of paralysis. No one is receiving new orders, the radar is non-operational, Technical teams are no longer connected to the launch sites. Any plans for a long-range counterattack have disintegrated within 15 minutes. In Sada, a group of soldiers is trying to restart the medium-range radio relay system. However, all the antennas have been burned down, the energy battery clusters are no longer operational, the coordination station is completely without power, and what terrifies them the most is that they can't hear anything. No signals, no withdrawal orders, no warnings from above. The B-52 circled to the east, the F-15E was returning to refuel. There were no more bright spots on the American radar screen, no objects were approaching the fleet, and there were no signs that the enemy had any capability to respond. Everything ended in less than 17 minutes. The Houthis thought they had the upper hand. They launched their drones. First they chose the timing, they deployed their forces in a surprise attack. But what they didn't anticipate was that the US didn't need to stay put to defend itself. With just one precise, coordinated strike, the entire organized attack plan was neutralized right from the outset. 4:02 a.m. The Houthi ground operations center on the outskirts of Sada is engulfed in chaos. Not because bombs are still falling, but because everything has been silent for too long. Communication Channel 4, the relay line to the UAV cluster near Harad, has lost signal. Channel 2, designated for Coastal Command, is completely down, and Channel 1, the line of communication with the Northern Logistics Center, is only emitting static, a long, hollow sound that sends chills down the spine. No one knows what the situation outside is like anymore. No one dares to issue the next order, and no one is sure if they still have control over anything. At the Sada command station, technical officers were trying to re-establish radio waves using short-range communication equipment. However, the receiving antenna had been hit during the first airstrike, the communication devices were distorted, the backup transmitter had no power source, all regional maps were outdated and lost their coordinates. The battlefield monitoring system, crucial for coordinating UAVs and missiles, officially went offline. In the Haja area, which was once the launch point for the drone attack, the fighting groups became scattered. Some units attempted to retreat using technical vehicles, while others took shelter in bunkers. However, there were no orders, no coordination, and no one knew if they were still fighting or had completely failed. By 4:15 a.m., the mobile air defense systems began operating in a limited capacity. From the hills east of Sada, a 57mm anti-aircraft gun started firing into the sky in a vague direction, without radar, without identifying a target. The rounds were fired in desperation, not aimed at anything specific, merely as an instinctive reaction when one knows they have been seen but cannot see who is watching. The shoulder-fired Manpads missile launchers were brought out of the bunker. However, the altitude of the B-52 was far beyond their reach. Not a single warhead could lock onto the target. One by one they began to realize their weapons were not designed for an enemy at that height. The panic doesn't come from the next attack, it comes from the fact that there are no more blows to be dealt, but they have nothing left to respond with. Less than 20 minutes ago, they were the ones in control, they were the initiators, they were the ones calling the shots. But now, they have no idea what they are waiting for, where they need to run, or who will give the orders. At the local operations control center, the Houthi commander issued a single order: cease all operations, maintain radio silence, urgently evacuate the remaining equipment. It's not because they lost, it's because they don't know if their opponent can continue fighting. And when you don't know where your adversary is in the sky, every subsequent action could be a trap. The attack that day lasted for 17 minutes, but the message it left behind continues to linger at a height no one can reach.